Salve discipuli. Today we're going to discuss Roman travel and hospitality. And with this discussion, we're going to discuss the roads and the money system of ancient Rome as well. At the end of this video, you should be able to describe how the Romans built their roads. They have a specific process which allowed these roads to last for thousands of years. You should also be able to define the terms hospes and hospitium, and then of course describe the relationship between the hospites in this relationship of hospitium. And then you should also know the names of the four most common coins as well as their relative worth. Before we begin discussing the construction of the Roman roads, it's important to know why these roads were originally built. And originally they were built to help move troops. So as Rome expanded from its one city location in Rome and expanded its territory outwards into Italy, and then later into the entire Roman Empire, the Romans needed a way to easily move their troops, so not only would they make the common workers initially build the roads themselves, but then afterwards they would move their troops to either a territory that they wanted to conquer, such as Germania, Germany, or Gallia, but they'd also be able to easily settle conflicts that arose because they could so quickly move their troops and negate hostilities. Oldest Roman road that we have is the Via Appia. It was the first one to be constructed, and here you can see a modern day example. The road is still in very good condition, and frequently carts and even vehicles will drive on sections of the Via Appia. It originally ran from Rome to Brundisium, which was an ancient Greek controlled city in the southern tip of Italy. And you know how they say that all roads lead to Rome? Well, that is because of the Miliarum Aureum, the golden milestone that was in the Roman Forum. Just as we have signposts on our modern day roads that tell us how many miles before the next big city, on Roman roads, they would have sign markers telling them how many miles left until the Miliarum Aureum. And since this was located in Rome, at least from the ancient Roman perspective, all roads really did lead to Rome. Now, the Romans had an amazing technique for building their roads. Unlike today's modern road constructions, which need repair, it seems like every summer, Roman roads have lasted for thousands of years. As I said before, we still use the Via Appia for traveling purposes with vehicles. So in this section, I just want you to kind of listen as I describe the process of building Roman roads. The next slide will actually have a notes page so you can make sure to get all the steps down in their order. Now, a typical Roman road is usually 23 feet wide by 3 feet deep in its original construction, and they would have drainage ditches along either side to allow for excess water to flow. So the first step is, of course, to dig that pit 23 feet by 3 feet deep. They would then fill the initial layer with very large rocks and a sand filler to fill in all of those gaps. On top of that, they would put smaller rocks and then include a layer of concrete on the very top. The concrete was actually made out of volcanic ash, and it acted as a leveler, either if this would be the last stage of building the Roman road, or if the road was close to the city, they would then put these large basalt stones on top of that as kind of a paving system. And basalt stones are actually very smooth, so it allowed for a much smoother ride as you were traveling. And then finally, because we mentioned this drainage ditch, they would keep that open for excess water to flow off of. And you can kind of see that this road has a slight curvature to it so that the excess water would in fact just naturally move towards that drainage ditch. Go ahead and pause the video so you can take down notes on the 5-step process that the Romans used to build their roads so that they would last thousands of years. And at the bottom of this link on Google Classroom, there's an additional video on building a Roman road from an experimental archaeological standpoint. We're going to watch as they try to build a Roman road using Roman constructions. With that said, by the end of the late Empire, the Roman road construction was incredibly massive. It was heaviest in Italy, of course, and then it expanded throughout the entire European province, even into the Near East and modern-day Asia, into Jerusalem, a little bit into Aegyptus, but of course the desert area, they're not going to focus on building roads. Later on, they had a road connecting the entire province of Africa, at least on the northern tip, with more extensive roads around the ancient city of Carthage. And then as they expanded northwards into Britannia, they had extensive roads where they had settled in Britannia as well. Now, unfortunately, the most common way to travel in ancient Rome was to travel by land. It was incredibly slow, but it was the safest means of travel. The Romans, at least until the middle of the Republic, were not great travelers by sea. At most, they had a few boats for river transport and travel. So the most common way would be to travel either walking along the road or in a raida, a carriage. And the raida only travels about 5 miles per hour, taking into account how frequently you would need to rest your horses from carrying an entire family. You would be lucky to get 30 miles a day in traveling by raida. On foot, the legionnaires actually were able to make approximately the same time, 25 miles per day, but they only had to account for themselves. And then, of course, our courier, because he switches out his horses and because he urges them on so ferociously with a whip, typically couriers can travel about 150 miles per day, which is why couriers were used as the main means of exchanging communications in the ancient Roman world. And of course, we know what our courier in our Ecce Romani story and the impact that that has had on the Cornelian family. While you're traveling, most people are going to avoid staying in inns. The people who stayed in inns are typically not high social class, and that is because inns typically had a very bad reputation. They were dirty, not cleaned very well. They were potentially full of bed bugs and other insects, and they attracted a rough crowd, and so there was a danger of either being in a fight or losing your property if it gets stolen from you. So instead, if you're high social class, you're going to stay at the villa or a domus of a hospes. This term that we know means either a guest, a host, or a friend. And the reason why we have 3 different translations of this word hospes in English is because it indicates really a partner in a hospitality relationship of hospitium. And so there's a lot of different ways that you could translate this into English to get the same sort of idea across. Now, if you are a host-based host, you have to take in your guest, and usually that guest would provide some sort of letter or token as a means of introduction. The strange thing is that hospitium relationships were usually arranged generations prior, and so there's actually a good chance that the host will never have met their guest until this very moment. So that letter of introduction is going to include the name, the family, the immediate family connections, and really what they're doing, why, and how long they want to stay. You're going to send that pretty far in advance to make sure that your host-based host is actually at home when you want to visit. Otherwise, you could provide a coin as a means of introduction and to also establish that you do have this hospitium relationship. If you look closely at this coin, we can see Decus dicit hospites, and this indicates that a man named Decus from the family of Decus does in fact recognize that they are a hospites and that they have this hospitality relationship. Finally, a quick note about some of the most common ancient Roman nummi or coins. There really were 4 ancient Roman coins that were the most popularly used. The first one is the bronze as and Discipuli. Please watch your pronunciation on this word. It is the as, and in the plural that is the ases. It is by far the smallest coin, not worth very much, and is probably the most typically used for the lower classes. The next would be the silver sestertius, quite a bit bigger, and as we'll see on the next slide, worth a little bit more than the as. The silver denarius is in fact one of the smaller coins in the ancient Roman world, And this is by far the most commonly used coin for an everyday worker, kind of like our dollar bill today. And this is actually the average daily wage for an unskilled worker like a farmer or a serf, or for a common soldier who didn't have any leadership responsibilities. The coin that was worth the most in the ancient Roman world was made out of gold, the aureus, and it's approximately the same size as the denarius, just made out of a more expensive and rare metal. Now on this slide, you guys can kind of see an approximate modern equivalent of Roman coins. And this is a very approximate chart based on lists that we have from the Army, what they spent, how many coins they used to spend on it, and approximately how many of each item a soldier would get as a daily ration. We're then able to extrapolate based on a modern market to get a modern equivalent or range. So the os is worth approximately $2, the sestertius approximately $5, the denarius approximately $20, and then the aureus anywhere from $375 to $700 on a more modern market. Now, since the denarius is the average daily wage for an unskilled worker, I want you guys to just imagine for a moment if you only had $20 a day in which to buy everything that you would need in order to live. This includes rent, it's going to include your phone, your internet, and of course it's going to include your food. And this is not just for yourself, but for your entire family, since in a low-class family, likely only the father is going to be the one earning any kind of money. While you're not going to be responsible for knowing the modern equivalent of what these coins are worth today, you will be using this chart in your shopping with Roman coins practice, where you pick 5 items that you would like to buy if you could, and then figure out the lowest amount of money you would need in Rome. So the os, the sestertius, the denarius, and the aureus, how many of those you would need in order to buy the item that you wish. When I think of the monetary system of the ancient Romans, I am reminded of our American system of money and how much each coin is worth in comparison to the other, because as you can see, there are a total of 10 asses in one denarius, pretty common to our 10-cent coin, just not worth the same. And we also see that there are 4 sesterii in one denarius, much like a 25-cent coin, if we imagine that the denarius, that average daily wage, is the dollar system. Now, if only the US had a $25 bill, this comparison would be absolutely perfect. So to skip lead, this is all we have to talk about Roman travel and hospitality. Make sure to do your Google Classroom practice shopping with Roman coins, and valete.